again. And it is a pleasure now for this second half of the workshop to introduce Yvette Cabrera from NRDC that will guide us in, let's say, the sixth priority, I don't remember the number, of the Milan Pact framework for action. So Yvette, the floor is yours.
Thank you. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm going to stand because I was sitting over there and everyone looks kind of small up here, even though I'm probably still pretty small up here. So, all right. Hi, everyone. I'm Yvette Cabrera. I work for NRDC, which is Natural Resources Defense Council. We are a US-based organization, and so I want to caveat a lot right now that much of the data I will show you today is based on US data, but many of the tools and examples I'm going to show you are widely applicable across many different international areas, stakeholders, sectors. So my task today is to share more about food waste, why it's important, and what kind of policies and tools exist to address this. So I want to take a quick poll. Who here has worked on food waste, knows a lot about food waste? Raise your hand. I'm trying to gauge how much I should share. Okay. All right, cool. Not actually as many as I thought. But I'll keep the kind of 101 pretty straightforward. So as I mentioned, I'm with Natural Resources Defense Council. We are an environmental advocacy organization that has been around since for over 50 years. And we work in the US across a range of issues, everything from saving bees to food waste to stopping oil and gas. And we use a lot of tools to do that. So we have already sued the Trump administration about 35 times since he came into office. We, push policies in state houses, in cities, which is kind of what I'm going to be talking about today. And we work on all these issues, and I want to drill down on why food waste, why an organization that works across so many different sustainability issues and environmental issues focuses on this. And so here, again, these are our US facts and data points, but this is why we work on this, because we know that when we waste food, we're actually wasting all of the resources that went into producing that food, to transporting it, and to ultimately disposing of it. In the US, we are wasting about 38% of our food. That includes both the food that we grow in the US and the food that we import from around the world. And it's a huge economic issue for us, not just at the kind of national level, but really at the individual consumer level, money in our pockets level. And you can see on the right side of the slide here, all of the kind of resources impacts that we're seeing in the US as a result of this waste. And not to mention, not just impacts on our resources, but it's also a huge climate impact. So when we waste food, we're actually generating emissions up and down the food supply chain. And then when that food ends up in a landfill or an incinerator, there are additional emissions associated with that. Right now in the US, and I know this is similar in many places across the world, food is the #1 material in our landfills by volume. And when, as I mentioned, when it's in there, the food will break down for a very, very long time, meaning that it releases methane for a very, very long time after it's put in there. And this table here is actually from a really great partner, Project Drawdown. If you haven't heard of them, they've cataloged the top 100 existing climate solutions, and food waste is #1 there. So I'll tell you quickly a little bit about what NRDC does on this front. We work across the federal government, the state governments, and city governments. And we do so because we know that, at least in the US, we can't really make impact on one of those levels without working at the other ones as well. So for example, many cities in the US are governed by their state regulations, state laws that are in place, and have to comply with them, though they can also make their own policies and and rules within their cities. And then many states, for example, and cities get funding from the federal government in order to build the infrastructure that they need to carry out some of these projects. So really important there that we're kind of working on all these three levels at the same time. So here's a kind of snapshot of NRDC's Food Matters initiative. We have about, I think, around 60 cities in the US participating currently. And we have now been at this with our Food Matters project since about 2016. We started doing really intensive research in cities to understand how much food was going to waste and what the potential was to rescue more food in those cities. And then we wanted to put that research and data into practice and really see if we could develop alongside our city government partners and local partners, develop policy that could actually make a dent in that food waste that we were seeing in our data. So here are kind of all the different strategies that we use in Food Matters to kind of work towards these food waste policy changes. And I'll breeze through this one since all y'all know why cities. Again, it could look different in every country, but waste management is usually one of the largest municipal expenses for the city government. Many of our cities around the world have climate and sustainability goals, which we're trying to hit, and there's a huge potential to do that through food waste. And high rates, there are really high rates of food insecurity in cities because that's where the bulk of the population lives. And so we really have this ability to kind of hit on multiple levers, multiple priorities with one fell swoop. And cities often kind of deal with similar issues around lack of infrastructure, lack of data, lack of capacity and funding. And so this really, for better or for worse, kind of creates this opportunity area for organizations like NRDC and other folks in this field kind of coming in to help, encourage that knowledge sharing and try to get them more funding, et cetera, to carry out this work. So that was kind of my Food Waste 101. And now we're going to talk a little bit about tools that exist. I would say if you take one thing away from my talk right now, it's to go to this website and download this toolkit, because we just revamped this toolkit. We just re-released it 2 months ago. It is, I would say, a very intensive guide, but that is very easily digested and read to understand where to start if you are interested as a city in exploring food waste policy. It is really designed to help you from where you are. So some cities are way more advanced on this. Some cities have a lot of infrastructure. Some cities have none. Some are very connected with their food rescue community. So it's really designed to kind of meet you where you're at and provide a set of options that will kind of fit your best scenario. And I will say, I will show you. The toolkit is divided up into these 3 different categories. So again, we understand that not every city is at the same starting place. So what we did was say, with these foundational tools, here are the things that are really going to be core to your long-term success on food waste. So things like gathering data, understanding what your baseline of food waste is in your city, how much could be rescued from the food waste that you're generating. And then also doing things like setting food waste reduction targets. And I think very importantly is using your ability as a city government, the tools that you have at your disposal to demonstrate to other businesses, to residents, that this is a priority and that you are going to lead by example for them. So we have a whole section built out on what a city might do to address food waste within their own buildings, within their own operations, et cetera. The next set is kind of the ambitious scenario. So it's like you're starting off really well, but you might not be ready to go all the way. And so these are really around helping businesses and institutions understand how to go about managing their food waste better, educating residents, and really, I will say some of these maybe are transformative as well, but really focusing on kind of laying the groundwork for future success. Things like building infrastructure, for example, or figuring out how you can go about partnering with food rescue stakeholders in your city to expand that capacity. And then the last one is transformative. And from our perspective, these are the things that are actually going to make like really long-term changes in your city when it comes to food waste. So for example, I will say, maybe this isn't a really recognized term, but implementing a pay-as-you-throw policy, which in the US is basically unit-based pricing for waste collection services. So that means if you normally have a trash can that is 50 gallons, and now as a city you want to also implement a composting waste stream for residents, you can right size the containers and say, well, actually, we'll give you composting for a reduced price or for free if you're able to actually if you choose to kind of go down to a smaller size in your trash bin. And those kind of price fluctuate, or that price balancing will actually help you generate money from that waste stream along the line and help the program be more self-sustaining. So again, the toolkit's really wonderful. Please take a look at it. I'm happy to help guide people there. And here is another, I wanted to share these because this is one of the things that we've heard the most from a lot of cities that we work with, is that they are really keen to work on policy to help get it passed, and they just don't have the time or expertise to start from scratch. And so what we've done over the past couple of years is actually research and develop and write model policy language that any city can take and say, I'm going to adapt this language to my city and try to get it passed. So we've done all the legwork of trying to figure out what's working in the cities that have already done this and what is not working, and how to kind of control for that as you're trying to pass this policy in your city. And again, this is all US focused, but I think these themes generally, like, how to mandate that the city procure compost when they're procuring soil, for example. There are things like that any city can do that are really powerful levers. And I wanted to share this little graph. It is just illustrative, but I wanted to emphasize that one of the first things that we do with cities always is help them understand what their baseline food waste data looks like. So NRDC developed a food waste calculator that can help cities understand what food waste looks like across these sectors. Again, all of these sectors might look flip-flopped in some cities or some countries, but these are kind of the top generating sectors. And in the US, the top 3 are usually always the top 3 in some, and maybe like mixed around a little bit, but those are usually always the top 3 in any city that we look at. And now I wanted to stop talking about theoretical examples of policy and actually share some of the examples of work that we're doing in cities. So here, I mentioned, we have around 60 plus cities in our network, and we conduct very regular kind of knowledge sharing webinars with them, trainings, et cetera. And then in some cities, we're much more heavily involved, and we're kind of meeting with them very regularly, helping them to actually craft this policy language, or figuring out how to kind of move different programs within their cities alongside them. And so you'll see this is kind of a little snapshot of some of the work we've done. And I actually wanted to have some real life examples because I know a lot of our colleagues are actually in the audience right now, and it's probably better to hear from them what they're working on than it is to hear it from me. So Ari, would you mind coming up really quick and giving a quick spiel on what Columbus is doing? You'll see Columbus is in the middle tier here. And one of the things that they're working on is trying to make composting easier. Go for it.
Okay, can folks hear me? Okay, so I'm Ari Alex. I'm the sustainability manager for the city of Columbus, which is the largest city in Ohio. We're a city of about 1 million people. We are actually working with NRDC and the Food Matters cohort on zoning. So with their municipal and community composting zoning code, we are undergoing a complete comprehensive zoning update in the city, really to anticipate the upcoming density we need for multifamily and the need for a lot more housing. And with that, we are making sure that composting is built in at a foundational level at each of those new zoning ordinances that we're putting in. So we have about 350 community gardens in the city of Columbus. The new zoning code would allow for community scale composting at each of those gardens, which would mean residents in those multifamily units and single family housing units could now bring their food scraps and any of their wasted food to their local community garden. It would compost in that garden. That material would be then used to grow additional fruits and vegetables in that community, which would then feed the people in that community. So it helps with our small scale and medium scale urban agriculture, but it helps reduce that waste, particularly as we build apartments and multifamily units, which may not have space to compost or have a garden in their own space. And so it is part of that new zoning code. It'll apply to 40% of the parcels in the city along high density traffic corridors. So we are really looking at some density, and we are adopting the NRDC composting code, which we did not have the expertise to write on our own. And this is something that we are doing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Perfect. Oh, I think it's up. Okay, thank you. And thanks for bringing that energy. Yes. Okay, great. So that's just one example. There are pockets across the US of really wonderful energy on this topic. And we do have a big US city contingent here, so please find them. And I wanted to mention lastly, just a little bit of the work that we've done alongside our partners with the City of Milan and the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, because as I mentioned, a kind of core tenet of our Food Matters initiative is that we need to get cities to learn from other cities. And as you just saw, NRDC is not always the best messenger to tell cities what they can and should be doing, right? It's learning from other cities and what's working and what's not. And so this was back in 2023. We hosted a tour of US and European cities alongside our partners Bloomberg and C40 as well, and partnered with Milan and the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact to do a tour of the premier city on food waste. And I captured here on the side some of the major takeaways for us, but I think at its core, what these kinds of things really do is just, inspire cities to actually take what they're seeing home and figure out how they might apply it where they live. And so it's been a really amazing opportunity to get to do that with our city partners and with you all here. And I think one of the kind of really wonderful outcomes that we've seen, for example, the city of Boston was on this tour, and they were so inspired by Milan's food waste hubs that they are actually now seeking to create one in their city. And they've gotten the buy-in of their mayor, of their city council, and they're now kind of funneling investment into creating their own food waste hub in the city, which I will say is there are kind of different models of it throughout the US, but this is going to be the first one that really looks pretty similar to what we see in Milan. So we've been really excited about that. And I wanted to close by saying that I'm always happy to talk about food waste, but also I think that food waste is really an opportunity. It's kind of like the entry point to many other food systems issues. As I mentioned, it kind of touches on all these other parts of the food system, like labor, economics, et cetera. And it's really an opportunity as you kind of start to dig into it once you dig into it, you realize you can't not talk about school food as well. And you can't not also talk about farm labor, right? So it's really this like intersectional issue that I think is an easy way for people working in cities to demonstrate that they're kind of doing this great work, and then open up this dialogue among people who care on some other issues that are very hard to tackle within our food system. So I will leave it there. And I think we're going to move into our kind of workshopping portion, right? Yeah. Okay, I'll let you take it off. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvette, and thanks to Columbus for sharing their experience. It is indeed now time, after this inspirational let's say, deep dive into how a key partner for cities can, let's say, foster the transformative potential that is coming from even just from an exchange. If then there is no further support afterwards, things can kind of remain the same way they were before. But indeed, it is now, thank you. It is now time. Time. No, but it's not going. Yeah, but yeah, you can. I think you can see still. Okay. It is now time to, let's say, just put an eye on the resources that also are available for all the signatory cities of the pact. And then we go to the exercise, which I think can be a very interesting conclusion for our time here today. So, of course, as you all know very well by heart, the framework for action of the Milan Pact is a set of recommended actions, and they are split into 6 categories, thematic categories, and the last one is indeed about food waste. So here you see listed the 4 thematic recommendations on food waste. So the framework for action is meant to be an inspirational tool for mayors, for cities that are active. So cities that are signatory do not, let's say, it's not mandatory to implement each of these actions. They're meant to guide, let's say, our action. So now it works again. Great. In addition to that, as we mentioned before, and I really invite you all to keep an eye on the session that will be about the indicators. It is on Wednesday morning at 9 in the main venue, the same where you will be tomorrow, where RUAF, FAO, and representatives from the Milan Pact will speak even more about how it is fundamental, crucial, really, to use these guidelines, because they are developed for cities, but they're also waiting for feedbacks from cities saying, this is not working very well, please edit, add this angle or anything that might come from you. And indeed, we have from the very first edition of this indicators framework and list, we have 4 indicators to assess the impact of our action on food waste reduction. So this was to remind you all that these are available on the website, and that people really poured the effort into the development of the actions, but mainly of the indicators to track of the impact. And lastly, a reminder, the Milan Pact Awards are a tool to share the knowledge that is coming from your fellow cities. So this is just to remind you briefly that it's been since almost 10 years that we have been collecting experiences from cities working on food waste. You can ask us to dig into a specific experience. It may be very near, it may be very far. And these were indeed the results of the Milan Pact Awards from 2022. And the last one that you see highlighted here is the one regarding food waste. So London was awarded with the best prize for the best practice, but also Cincinnati, Guelph, and Quelimane received a special mention for their experience and their action on food waste reduction. And these people will be in the room, not all of them, but many of them will be there tomorrow. This being said, let's look at the tools that we can work with today. So we have printed copies of these canvases that I'm showing you. So you will have them in your hands in really a couple of minutes. But I wanted to start guiding you based on the knowledge and the experience that we gathered in food trails. So the project that we spoke before, we were able during the Milan study tour that was developed for 20 cities that visited that visited Milan to develop their own food waste action plan. And it was a work that we did together with NRDC and together with C40. We assessed how can a city or a person, even a person from an organization that is not a public administration, how can you start understanding how to work on a topic, and specifically on food waste? You start from understanding what is the governance and what are the partnerships that are present in your context. So it is a self-assessment tool in this case. Then, of course, you need to make a small prioritization exercise, because based on the sector and the actor, the kind of actors that you can touch with your food waste action plan, or even just an action, you select them and then you need to prioritize. Where are you starting from? And so these two tools are meant to really guide and make a bit of design thinking when moving from the policy, the recommended actions, to the actual implementation of an idea. The second tool that you will have and you will bring home with you is the stakeholders analysis. You heard it from Wageningen before. It is extremely important not only to collaborate, but also to be aware of who you're collaborating with. So identifying who are the people you're working with. So the list of stakeholders you see in the top, it's number, but it's a list. But then you need to understand, based on the power interest matrix, are these people only interested, but not really in the position to help with the process, or are they in the position to help, but not interested in the process? This is a very interesting angle to observe. The stakeholders, as well as in this case with the target that you see here, we try to put the stakeholders, if they're in the center, they're very near to the vision and the mission of the city. If they are in the outer part, they are less aligned. And we also make sure that we involve someone, more than someone, from the public sector, from the civil society, from the private sector, and from the research. So if, for instance, we only have stakeholders in half of the target, then we may need to structure more our synergies with the other sectors of the society. And so this is, again, an observation tool. And we will conclude, if we have time, but really this is to give you the hint, with a tool that was developed by researchers in food trails, and we called it Food Policy Action Canvas. So it is based on the idea that is coming from the business model Canvas. So when you want to develop a business model, you need to make sure that you have all the ingredients. So if you're missing some ideas in a business model, it will not sell, basically, and you lose your money. Same goes with the energy going into food policy actions. What is the value proposition that we are working for? Who are the stakeholders that we observed in the other tool? Who are the beneficiaries of the action that we are building? And then, based on these three aspects, so the one that are marked with A and the two B, then we move to which are the activities that we need to structure, which are the resources, and what is the relationship between the beneficiaries. And of course, once we structured our idea, we need to identify also if there are barriers for the implementation of that idea, and which are instead the drivers. So who is going to help us to do that? So these three tools, the two canvases on governance, the one on stakeholder analysis, and the one to design your idea are the tools that now we will go through. I would propose to maybe split in 2 or 3 groups. I would say 3 at least. Yeah. So it can be based on where you're sitting. So who is sitting at the back of the room will move at the very back. Those who are sitting in the first 3 rows, you are coming more near to the stage. And the central can gather together. We can move the chairs. It's really free. And then we can start exchanging. Of course, we have a limited time. I know that it takes time to take decisions and to implement ideas, but in this case, it's really an exercise. If you were to imagine an idea on food waste reduction in your city, or in your city, even if you're not a city, where would you start from? And let's try an exchange.